Fellas, two games to break down. Let's get into it. Let's start first and foremost with the afternoon bowl game, the first bowl game, or playoff game, I should say, of New Year's Eve. It will be 3 p.m. Central Time. The 2-seeded Michigan Wolverines, champions out of the Big Ten, against the 3-seeded TCU Horned Frogs. Michigan is a 7.5-point favorite as of recording this right now. First blush, and I'm not asking you to predict a winner yet. We'll do that at the end. But give me kind of the overview of this bowl game. Trey, we'll start with you. Michigan, TCU, what kind of catches your eye when it comes to this one?
Well, the simple, 30,000 foot view is you've got an amazing offense in TCU against a very formidable defense in Michigan. And I think that's the matchup that everybody's really excited to see. When you dive into it a little bit deeper, though, what I'm really interested to see is how both of these teams handle the contrasting styles of what they've faced throughout the whole year. We've talked about it all year with Michigan, how they're kind of able to just play these slow, drag it out games. And, I think they lose a lot of style points a lot of time. We've hit that nail on the head a whole bunch that they lose a lot of style points by just kind of playing an old school style, right? They're going to run the ball. They're going to establish the run. They're going to play really, really elite defense. And they're going to just kind of dominate teams, suffocate a lot of their conference schedule. Their defense looks really, really good. They've done it against a lot of teams that are in the lower 25% of offenses in college football. Your Iowas, your, other Big Ten teams. I don't want to throw a bunch of Big Ten teams under the bus right now, but different style of football than what TCU is facing week in and week out in the Big 12. And conversely, I think on paper, you look at TCU's defense and say, wow, that's probably going to be the worst unit on the field. But I'm really interested to see how they handle just a different style. Is Michigan going to be able to just line up and run the ball right at them? I think that's what most people expect. But, we haven't really seen TCU outside of Kansas State. We haven't really seen TCU face an offense like Michigan's. And Kansas State is kind of the closest one. It's a mixed bag throughout the year, right? You get the one win against Kansas State, the one loss in the Big 12 championship game. But I'm really interested to see just how these two teams handle contrasting styles and what they faced for most of the year.
Yeah, and I think if you want to talk about comparisons in terms of just offenses they've seen, I'm really looking at it from a physicality standpoint. I'm looking at, Michigan compared to the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah.
I think having that kind of dual back system that they've had, obviously they're not going to be with Blake Corum. That's extremely unfortunate for Michigan. But having a guy like Donovan Edwards who can really just tote the rock, get 25 to 30 carries and have no issue with it, I think is a massive plus for Michigan. But you look at that game, if TCU had won that game in a shootout, I would say, ooh, well, good luck, because you're not going to score the same way against Michigan's defense, because Michigan's defense is, fantastic. I think they're only giving up 85 yards on the ground and only 277 in the entire game. So this is, a situation where, for TCU, if they had won that game in a high-scoring fashion, I'd be nervous about them. But they beat Texas in a low-scoring slugfest where their defense was extremely physical, and for some reason that 3-3-5 was able to, fill gaps quickly, and the linebackers playing in space were able to get into the holes correctly and do that. I'm curious to see if they can do that against I think, much more physical Michigan team. I think just up front, there's a lot more maturity than what Texas had, and I do think that Donovan Edwards is maybe a slightly more punishing back than guys like Bijan, but I'm just curious to see maybe, how that matchup works out. I think that almost makes your entire game. These teams both match up pretty evenly just in terms of scoring. They came in 6th and 7th in scoring, both a little bit over 40 points a game. They both have similar numbers as far as what they do on offense and on defense. But I'm just, I'm curious to see how that TCU defense can match up in terms of, being able to stop that Michigan run attack.
I think for me, this game comes down to which defense rises to the occasion a little bit more. Because Garrett, you were spot on, 6th and 7th offensively for these two teams. So they achieve very similar results via different paths, right? TCU is certainly more through the air. Michigan, for the most part of the season, has been a lot of on the ground. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. Now it's going to have to be Edwards that's leading that charge. Defensively, though, Michigan, the third best total defense in the country, you have to scroll a ways to get to TCU. They're ranked 74th in the country. They've given up almost 1,000 more rushing yards over the course of the season. The pass defense has been a weakness for the Horned Frogs this season. The other thing that I found while I was researching this week, one thing that I think is super interesting to consider, TCU has 6 transfers that are first-year starters on this ball club. The rest of the 3 other playoff teams combined have 2. So TCU was a quick injection of talent. And has it always been pretty? No. They've had a lot of comeback victories, and that's what the playoff committee initially held against them, right? But they found a way to get that done. We talked about the strength of schedule, and Garrett, you compared Michigan to Texas. That's exactly who I was going to compare them to, because when you look at total offense, the best total offense or scoring offense that TCU played this year was the Texas Longhorns. They were ranked 20th in the country. Now they've got to take on a Michigan team that, Trey, like you said, is pound the rock, wear you down, crush you over the goal line, and take the air out of that football. I'll throw this back to you guys. What, if anything, can the TCU defense do to step up, to rewrite the script here a little bit? Because when you look on paper, that 7.5-point line looks about right, given the fact that Michigan is going to decrease that possession number.
Yeah, I think it's havoc plays. I think whenever a team that's down, right, whenever a team that's not favored to win or is like favored by more than a touchdown, usually what you see formulate to an upset is those havoc plays on defense, either a takeaway here or there, or getting a few sacks in opportune times, putting Michigan in 3rd and long situations. It sounds cliche, but they've got to keep Michigan behind the chains. If Michigan's getting 5, 6, 7 yards per carry, it's going to be a long day for the TCU Horned Frogs defense. But, if they're able to get some stops on first down, if they're able to put Michigan into passing situations on 2nd and 3rd down, then get some sacks, let their pass rushers. They have a pretty efficient pass rush. I don't have the numbers in front of me on where they rank nationally, but just the eyeball test will tell you that they have a very efficient pass rush that can make some plays. And that's the key. JJ McCarthy does not make a lot of mistakes. He's not going to wow you with the big plays. I know he had a few, downfield shots against Ohio State, but typically he's not going to wow you with the big plays. He's not typically what their offense is formulated around, but keeping him uncomfortable, keeping him off balance, and I think making him beat you with his arm because you put them in 3rd and long situations is the key for TCU.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to have to shut down the pass to have a chance at this, because so if you look at just the base defense that they run a 3-3-5, and I think JJ McCarthy was even talking about it in one of the pre-game press conferences. He was talking about if they come out there in the 3-3-5, they're excited because they're going to get to pull some guards and really smash them in the face, right? And they're talking about how they're going to have nose. And I love the trash talk, just to be clear. I love the persona around JJ McCarthy. He's an absolute, trash talk baller, and I love having that around college football. But I think that the key for TCU is going to be shut down the pass and don't give them anything. For as well as they do on offense, Michigan only averages 210 yards in the air per game. And so that's not necessarily a massive number. Not terrible by any means, but it's not a massive number. TCU boasts a really good pass defense, just in terms of what you'd expect in the Big 10, or the Big 12 rather. And Travius Hodges-Tomlinson won the Jim Thorpe. And so they have one of the best back there against, a Michigan receiving core that we've talked about. And they're not necessarily explosive. These guys aren't going to be, at the same caliber of some of the other teams. They might have, just on paper, one of the worst receiving cores in the playoff. I think if you just look at who the other teams are bringing into this one, I think, there's a chance that they have the worst of the group. If you're running a 3-3-5 and you can shut down the pass, that lets the safeties come up and it lets you get more guys around the line of scrimmage. And that's going to be what they need. You're not going to have guys at the point of attack like you normally would. So you have to be able to kind of stifle it by letting those linebackers creep up a little bit, let guys get around the edges. So you can't really stretch the field that well. You can kind of force them to go between the tackles. And then at that point, it's just about filling gaps and stopping the run. I think Michigan will be able to get, an easy 3, 4, 5 yards on most carries in this game, but it's about forcing them into things like 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, as opposed to 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2, right? If you're staying there for Michigan, you're ahead of schedule, you're going to be fine during this game. But if they can force you into passing downs where, it's maybe more of an obvious passing situation, I think they can suppress the Michigan attack and force this to be a lower scoring game for the Wolverines.
I'm so I'm weighing out. I think if this is a defensive match, Michigan's going to win.
Yeah.
I don't think that TCU's defense can play as consistently as the Wolverines can, nor do I think that they can be relied upon for those turnover, for those havoc plays in the biggest moments like I think you can with the Wolverines. Talked about Michigan's pass rush a couple of weeks ago. I think even it must have been leading into the Ohio State game. Even without guys like Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo, they have gotten to the quarterback actually more efficiently this year than they did the 2 years past when they had the brand name, big time, top 5 draft picks coming off the edge. So I've been really impressed with what Michigan has done. If it's a shootout, is that the only way that you guys see TCU winning this game? And if that is the case, can Michigan keep up offensively in a shootout? Because that's how TCU has beaten some opponents, is just by bludgeoning them into submission by scoring 1,000 points. Think back to the Oklahoma game.
Yeah, and I think that's the big concern if you're Michigan. I think if you're Michigan, your formula to winning this game is coming out and stifling that early, not letting TCU's going to try to, hit a big play or two in the first couple drives and try to get up 14-0. I think that's the formula for TCU, is to put Michigan on its heels immediately. If you don't see that happen, I think Michigan could walk away with this one relatively easily. But if you're Michigan, you got to come out and just whatever it takes, not let that happen. If you're Michigan and it's 0-0 at the end of the first quarter, I think you're feeling absolutely fantastic about your chances at that point.
Yeah, and Michigan's defense is by far the better unit of the two. I do think, though, that TCU could win this in a low-scoring affair, just because I think if it's low-scoring, what you're also talking about is the fact that Michigan's offense, for some reason, isn't humming, right? We talk about, both teams being good. Michigan scores plenty of points just like TCU, so getting in a shootout almost isn't in their favor, because if you ask me in a shootout who wins that game, it's typically the defense that makes that one or two extra plays. And I think I trust Michigan to make one or two extra plays than I trust TCU on defense. So in a shootout game, I'd almost think that goes Michigan's way, just because you expect that sack, that interception, that big stop on third down from Michigan. I think in a low scoring affair, that shows you that, hey, TCU is able to stand up and play physical. And at that point, you have a guy like Max Duggan who can make that extra play. And I think he's the dynamic factor here, right? I think if you're looking at who are the dynamic players on both of these offenses, Donovan Edwards is your guy on Michigan's team, but Max Duggan is absolutely the guy on TCU. Mm-hmm. And if you have a game that's, let's say, 17-17 in the fourth quarter, I feel great if I'm a TCU fan at that point, because, at that point you have a guy in Max Duggan who can make that extra play, who you've seen just has that X factor. He may not be the most polished, he may not be the best pro prospect, but at the same time, you can't deny that this guy makes plays and finds a way to win. And that's what he's been doing all year. And so, even if you're down a couple points in the fourth, I would almost feel better about that than if it's a back and forth slugfest where you're asking him to go out and score again and score again and score again, because Michigan is scoring again and scoring again and scoring again. I'd almost rather this be more of a low scoring game, because that shows that TCU's defense came to play, and then it's more of a make the most of your opportunities situation.
Okay, so let's do this. And Trey, I want to hear who your X factors are in this as well, but let's go ahead and make our picks for this. And Garrett, let's start with you. Pick your winner of this game and ultimately give a reason why.
Yeah, I think Michigan wins this game. I think that this is what most people are expecting. I don't think that they cover the spread, though. I think that this is a fairly close game where you have kind of I do think it'll be a back and forth scoring thing. I think that Michigan's defense will make more plays early, but man, TCU just doesn't go away. They won't go away. They won't quit. They'll hit you with some big plays, and they're going to find a way to score ultimately at the end of this one. I think you probably see something more in the realm of maybe a 31-28, 31-27, something like that, just as far as a final score goes. And I think ultimately at the end of the game, it's going to be a Donovan Edwards long touchdown run that does it. I think TCU will play decent defense in terms of stopping the run at times. I think that they'll find ways to get off the field. But I do think as the course of the game goes along, you're going to see a long run. You're going to see him break a tackle, hit the lane. You're going to see someone spring a big block. And I think ultimately that's what ends up doing it for Michigan.
Yeah, I'm going to lean Michigan here too. I think the margin of victory is a little bit wider, and I hate saying that because, TCU all year long, I've just loved watching this team develop and watching their run. Even told my TCU family at Christmas Eve that we're all frogs this year. Just kind of all, rallying together over that. But yeah, I think I'm going to go Michigan 31-20. I think similar to you, Garrett, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a big play. And I'm looking for which receiver is going to step up for Michigan because I don't know that, running the ball 3 times every series is going to get it done. I mean, we can talk about TCU's rush defense. If that's all you can do, they're just going to stack the box. And I don't care who you're playing against. If you don't have any pass threat, you're not going to be able to run the ball very effectively. So I don't know if that's Ronnie Bell. I don't know if that's Cornelius Johnson, but that's my X factor for Michigan. Who's going to step up and be that guy that JJ McCarthy can hit on those 3rd and longs when they find themselves in it and keep the chains moving? Because TCU is going to be really licking their chops to get after the quarterback and probably feeling like they're done a pretty good job. And just being able to demoralize them on a 3rd and 7 when you hit them for about a 15-yard play and keep a drive moving, that's going to be huge for Michigan.
I'm very similarly in the boat that Garrett is, where I think Michigan does win. I think it's a 31-24, 31-27 type of final. I do think it's very close. For TCU, if they're going to win this game, they're going to have Tay Barber, Quentin Johnston getting open. You've got to have that separation because I think Michigan is going to bring that pass rush, and you've got to have your receivers separating early to give you that chance. That's how TCU has made these splash plays, right? And Kansas State did a great job of getting to Max Duggan. When TCU's offense wasn't humming in Dallas, it was because Kansas State didn't give him a moment to breathe. As soon as he took that snap, he was having to evade rushers. The wide receivers were not getting separation, and he didn't have clean looks down the field. And I think you're going to see that turned up a notch with Michigan's pass rush. So ultimately, I do think Michigan's defense is the X factor here. We've seen JJ McCarthy be able to throw the ball when he needs to. It may not be the staple of their offense, but when he's absolutely needed to against really, really solid secondaries, at least statistically, McCarthy's been able to find wide receivers down the field. I think that combination, just a better balance plus a stifling defense, is going to give Michigan the victory here. But I got to say, saying that TCU keeps it within even 5-6 points potentially, I think is a massive credit to them because statistically, they probably shouldn't hang around in this game. That defense on paper is just not very good. And I think that there is a chance that Michigan, if they do the opposite of what Trey, you've said TCU has to do, if they score 14 early on, then I think it could be a really long afternoon for the Horned Frogs. But at the same time, we've seen them be able to come back from that. Yeah. When it happened at Oklahoma State, when it happened with Kansas State the first time, even the second time, they rallied back, right? And they make it a game, they tie it up. Obviously, in the Big 12 championship game, they fell short. But this team has no quit in it, despite what it might say statistically on paper. So I do expect this to be a good game, but I do think that Michigan will punch the first ticket into the national championship game.
Well, and it's kind of a rough draw for TCU. I think Michigan might be the best just statistical team on paper in the playoff. Just as far as well-rounded, they're solid on defense. They play exceptional defense, but they also score a bunch. And so I think if you're TCU, you're kind of begrudging the fact that this is your first matchup. You might rather get in a shootout with Ohio State, or you might rather just depend on a Georgia team who hasn't been able to score as well across the course of the year and maybe hope that you can get into a slugfest with them. But, I think TCU, the season that they've had, especially based on, the expectations coming in, there's no moral victories, but at a certain point, you got to step back and say, wow, what a ride, and hope that you can, use this as they have started to use this with the transfer portal, with recruiting, and to start building, something even more for the future.
I actually think this is the best chance that TCU would have to make a national championship game is going up against Michigan. Not trying to be a Michigan hater. I just think this is the best possible matchup for them. I think that this team represents the best chance to just go out and blitz someone from the beginning, right? Just throw everything at them, get up by a couple scores, and then just kind of go from there. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm really, like I said off the top, I'm really excited to see this matchup. I think it's going to be one of the better semifinal matchups that we've seen.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I get where you're saying, because I think TCU better against the run than they are the pass. Ohio State, right? They make a lot of their hay through the air. Georgia, who knows? It kind of depends on what they decide to do that week. If Stetson Bennett's on, or if they've just got to run the ball right through your throat. But yeah, I'm really excited for this game again. 3 p.m. on New Year's Eve.
Gracious him! How about